Now let's talk about this Superstar Shakeup. They are doing a Shakeup again on TV this week. And now I still prefer the old draft format myself with the dueling general manager picks. I kind of miss that. And let's not forget here, and I hope the company doesn't forget this, there can be trades between both brands, right? You've got Paige as the new GM on SmackDown. Kurt Angle is the GM on Raw. They can work together in a friendly way over the course of the year to trade people back and forth. That's something we really don't see. We don't get enough of that. Just because people don't shift over this week does not mean that they cannot be traded to a different brand throughout the course of the year. And I hope that's something that we see more of, because I think that would be fun. And that's just another way to, I don't know, make the brand split more interesting and more exciting. And it's something that they don't do. And I don't quite understand why that is. Because you don't just have to wait until April every year to shake the roster up. Now, here are the moves that I would make. I'm just giving this some thought. And for me, Nakamura needs to stay put where he is on SmackDown. And one of the reasons is not just to continue the AJ Styles feud. That's one of the reasons. And I would keep AJ on SmackDown. But I would also keep Daniel Bryan on SmackDown. And so at some point, once the AJ Styles feud has run its course, and I don't know if it ends with Nakamura winning the championship or not, but I would like to see them get to Nakamura and Bryan. I know the two of them want to work together. That's one of the reasons Nakamura even came to this country, even came to this company, was to work with Daniel Bryan. I hope they get that chance, and I hope they don't split them up. So let me just say that right out of the gate. Now, Dean Ambrose is a name that we haven't heard a lot about lately. He's still on the injured list. I don't know how much longer it's going to be before he comes back. I think it's still going to be another 2-3 months before we may see him back on TV. Ambrose right now, technically, is a member of the Raw roster. I would keep him there. But the reason I would keep him there is to eventually turn him heel and have him challenge Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship. Now, this is all predicated on Roman becoming the big babyface champion. Okay, now if they were to go with the idea that I pitched before of turning Roman and aligning him with AOP or something, then obviously I would have a change of heart about turning Ambrose. I would not turn both of them. Contrary to what some people think, Solomonster doesn't just want to turn everybody. I know it kind of seems like that, but that is not true. But if they go with Roman as the babyface champion, I do think it would be good for Ambrose to come back and, whether it's right away or they build to it, let him go heel and let him challenge Roman for the title. Because we still have not had the chance to see Dean Ambrose get a good solid run as a singles heel. He was a heel when he came in as part of the Shield, and once they turned, that's just the way he's been ever since. And I think he's got something in him as a heel that they have not tapped into yet that can be very dark and can be very fun to watch. And so I hope that they do something with him, when he comes back. That's not just the same old, same old. I mean, he's still popular. He's got his fans, but Ambrose was sort of treading water before he got hurt and was not doing, anything very interesting or exciting. So that's what I would do with him when he comes back. Keep him on Raw, but do the turn. Seth Rollins, the other member of the Shield, he is the Intercontinental Champion. I would shift him over to SmackDown Live, and I would have him take the IC title with him. Jinder Mahal, I would shift him over to the Raw brand, have him take the US title with him. And that is the only reason I am advocating any kind of a move with Jinder. I really can't bring myself to care too much, but if you move the IC title, you got to move the US belt to the other brand. So I would do a swap with the two of them. Jeff Hardy is back. Jeff Hardy is back as Jeff Hardy. He is not back as Brother Nero. And frankly, I think it would be better for Jeff to do his own thing. If there is any value left in Jeff Hardy as himself, as a singles star, it is as a singles star. You can always incorporate cameos, him as Brother Nero, whatever, if they do things with the broken stuff with Matt. But I would separate them, and I would put Jeff on SmackDown. I would separate him from Matt. Let Matt do his thing. Matt doesn't need Jeff. Jeff, I think, still has value as like an upper mid-card, sort of lower main event level guy, as long as he stays out of trouble, which is always the question with him, I guess. But I would move Jeff over to SmackDown. I would move Randy Orton over to Raw. Orton does not excite me terribly these days. He's almost really a part-time performer at this point in some ways. But I think he's done all he can do on SmackDown. So I would move him over to Raw. I know he's been dying to go heel. We know this because every time I hear him ask that question in an interview, he always talks about how much more fun it is to be a heel. So whether they turn him or not is up to them, but I would move him over to Raw. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. You know, I floated the idea earlier in the podcast about think outside the box with these guys. You don't have to rush these two back. You got enough talent on the roster right now, okay? Have some fun with this. They lost at WrestleMania. So for them to go right back to SmackDown would make no sense. Right? Would make no sense to put them on SmackDown. But at the same time, they were on Raw Monday night fighting for a spot, and they both lost. So that leaves them in limbo. So you do one of two things. You either put them back on NXT to continue to sell the angle, and eventually they're going to end up on Raw or SmackDown. We know this, but you got to put some distance between. Like, this just happened. They just lost at WrestleMania, and they just lost on Raw Monday night. To just put them on Raw or SmackDown 1 week later would be incredibly stupid. So I would play with this and have fun. Have them go to NXT, or have them try to go to NXT, and William Regal sort of shuns them away, and let them do some indie shows. They've got agreements with a company like Evolve. It would not be difficult to let them go and have El Generico makes his return to the indies, or Kevin Owens shows up at an Evolve show as Kevin Steen, and he, wrestles a couple of matches and wrestles Keith Lee or something. Maybe you can have some fun with this. So that's what I would do. I will say this. Ultimately, when they end up back on the main roster, whatever brand it is, I would separate them. I was shocked when they did the last Shakeup, and Owens went to SmackDown, and Zayn followed him. Because I thought, man, we've seen so many matches between these two. Even I'm sick of it. It's time to split them up. And they didn't do that. They kept them together. And now they've been a tag team. They've been like a pairing for a while. Whenever this is all resolved and they do end up back on the main roster, I think Owens should go to Raw and Zayn should go to SmackDown. And I would separate the two of them. Now let's talk about the women. Sasha Banks and Bayley. Now Sasha Banks and Bayley are having a match on Raw tomorrow night. This is the first singles match in a while. Well, actually, I think they had a singles match on TV. I want to say, was it like a month and a half ago, maybe? But they did not do the match at WrestleMania because the card was already stacked. I figured they would wait until Backlash. Now they're doing it on TV. And I thought to myself, well, maybe they're doing it on TV because they know they're going to split them up in the Shakeup. And then I thought, that would be incredibly stupid. Because this is a feud that has been built up for months. Literally months. They have been building the dissension. They have been building this story between them. And I know some people are already sick of it. It's like, enough already. Every week it's the same shit. They're together and she hits her by accident or she walks out on her, and it's like, just lock them in a room and just, kiss and make up already. This is getting old. So they're doing the match tomorrow night, and I hope that they're not splitting them up because there has to be a payoff to this. And I think to just pay this off in a random TV match after building this up for literally months would be just completely ridiculous. But I would move both of them. I think Sasha Banks should go to SmackDown. I think Bayley should go to SmackDown. So I would move the two of them over there. Charlotte, I would move to Raw. And I think that may be why she dropped the championship, the way she did. Because she can't be the SmackDown Women's Champion if you're going to Raw. And if they're going to begin to build or eventually build to a match with Charlotte and Rousey, then Rousey's a Raw star, unless she moves. I don't see her going to SmackDown. Rousey's on Raw. Charlotte should be on Raw. So I would move her over, and I think she will be moved over, because that does set up the big match for WrestleMania next year. I would also move Becky Lynch to Raw. Becky Lynch has been criminally underused on SmackDown. Becky is still one of the most popular women they have. She's more than capable in the ring. And I don't know why they haven't been doing, more with her. I guess it's just one of those things where everybody has their time to shine, and right now it's just not her time. It's almost like a cycle. And this is not her cycle. Whatever the case is, they need to be doing more with her. And I think she would benefit by having a new set of opponents, new environment. So you got two horsewomen on SmackDown, that being Sasha and Bayley. and you have the other two on Raw. You're basically just swapping both of them, one brand for the other. Now, Asuka is an interesting case. Nia Jax is the champion on Raw. We've seen Nia Jax and Asuka before. And it was always a case of Asuka being the babyface and Nia being the heel, like the heel monster, right? Now Nia is a babyface, and she's going to have her time to shine as champion. I don't think they're taking that title off her for a while. And even though they beat Asuka for the first time at WrestleMania, I don't want to see Asuka start losing every week on TV. I still think you need to protect her, and frankly, it's completely unrealistic also to think that you would have this woman who was undefeated for like 900 days. And just because she loses once, she starts losing all the time, right? So, I don't want to see her start losing all the time. So if they don't jump immediately to Asuka and Nia, it's like, what do you do with Asuka? Well, we've already seen Asuka and Charlotte. So even if Charlotte moves to Raw, that's kind of a match we've already seen. You could do Asuka and Becky if Becky moves over. You got Ember Moon. Ember Moon and Asuka had a great little feud in NXT. You can kind of pick that up on the main roster. But I look at this and I say to myself, you know what? I would move Asuka over to SmackDown. Especially if I move Charlotte to Raw, I would move Asuka over to SmackDown. I would not keep them on the same brand. And another reason I would do that is if you move Charlotte, there's a big void on SmackDown because you're missing a top female babyface. I don't know if Sasha Banks is going to end up turning or not. She could be that top babyface, I suppose, but she's kind of doing the thing with Bayley right now. Somebody's got to fill that spot that's left vacant by Charlotte. And I think Asuka could be that person. I think Asuka could be the baby face. See what I did there? The baby face of the SmackDown Women's Division. So those are the moves I would make with the women. Rusev Day. I would bring Rusev over to Raw. Right? I mean, it's obvious they're not doing much with him on SmackDown. I would move him and Aiden together over to Raw and bring that act over there. The Usos, I would move to Raw. Look, I am as big a fan as anybody of the matches that the Usos have had with the New Day. They had a feud last year. They had match after match after match after match. And it seemed like they got better as time went on. That Hell in a Cell match I thought was fantastic that they had in October. And then they sort of got away from it for a little bit, and then they got right back to it. And we had the Usos against the New Day on television not too long ago, and then they were part of the same match at WrestleMania, and then they had another match on TV this past week, and I am officially sick to death of seeing the Usos and the New Day. They have to be separated. I would keep the New Day on SmackDown. I would move the Usos over to Raw. That is what I would do with the Usos. Drew McIntyre is on his way back. He's ready to return. He had the arm injury at NXT TakeOver that he had suffered against Cien Almas. He's been out for a while. He's ready to come back. There is no reason to send Drew McIntyre back to NXT. He was already the NXT champion. There's nothing left for him to do unless he's going to feud with Aleister Black, and I don't see that happening. NXT is just fine without him. And he has outgrown NXT. They could use him on the main roster. I hope they don't use him in a comedy role. I hope they don't use him as just some random mid-card act. But I think you take that chance and you put him on Raw or SmackDown. If it were me, I would bring him back and I would have him be part of the Raw brand. And it just so happens, if you look at all the moves that I'm proposing here, that if they were to go with these moves, we would have all three members of 3MB back on the same brand. Now, I am not saying I want to see a 3MB reunion. I'm just saying that if they follow these moves, we would end up with 3MB back on the same show. I know that would be tempting for Vince McMahon, but I would hope he resists those urges. Andrade Cien Almas, I just mentioned him. Him and Zelina Vega, they are a main roster act. He had a nice little run as the NXT champion, and now it's over. Now, you could keep him in NXT. You could do a rematch. And that doesn't mean that he can't still be drafted to the main roster, because we've seen that before too. Guys are drafted to the main roster, but they finish out their run in NXT. I'm perfectly fine with them doing a rematch. He's entitled to it, right? That's the WWE rules. If you're a champion and you lose, you get your obligatory rematch. So I would expect that Almas is going to get his rematch, whether it's on TV, if it's the next TakeOver show. But I think he's moving to the main roster. He has to come with Vega. You cannot split them up. They have to come up together. And I would put them on SmackDown. And the other move I would mention here is that Big Cass is another one who, much like McIntyre, was hurt. He is ready to come back. It's just a question of when and what brand. I would keep him on Raw. He's a tough one because I think he's so closely linked with Enzo, and because of the whole situation with Enzo, and also Enzo was always the charisma and the mouth of that pairing. That without him on his own, and Cass did okay, you know, when he was on his own when Enzo was hurt. If you remember that period of time, and they were kind of pushing Cass a little bit, he did okay for himself. He can talk. I mean, he's no Enzo, but I think he'll be okay. It's just, you know, does he just come back as Big Cass and that's it? Do you repackage him in some way? Do you put somebody else with him? Does he get a manager? Do you put one of the women with him? I don't know. I don't know. I haven't honestly thought that much about Big Cass, but I do think you got to think about that. But I would keep him on the Raw brand. I would keep him where he is right now. So those are the moves I would make if I was doing my own superstar shakeup. I'm sure you guys have your own ideas for what moves you would make, and by all means, I'd love to hear what your plans would be. But it should be fun. It's good to shake things up in that. You know, you move people around, you spark some new feuds. The shakeup did some damage to Smackdown last year. Smackdown was definitely not the beneficiary of the last superstar shakeup. You can do a shakeup in a way that actually benefits both brands. And so I hope that this strengthens SmackDown, it strengthens Raw, it makes for some fresh, fun new matches. They bring up some NXT faces because we could use some new faces as well, and then we can, you know, hopefully build from there. But there's no doubt that the shakeup definitely did some damage to SmackDown last year, so hopefully that's not the case this time around. Not much to say about the NXT show this week, which was mostly just takeover recap videos outside of the War Machine making their debut. That was really the only big thing that happened on TV this week in terms of NXT. They are now called the War Raiders. That is their new name. They are the War Raiders, not to be confused with the Oakland Raiders. War Machine is a much better name, but, you know, it is what it is. They ran in on a match between Heavy Machinery and the team of Tino Sabbatelli and Riddick Moss, laid out all four guys. And so with the departure of AOP, we now have War Machine, which is a more than capable replacement, I think, in the NXT tag team division. That is, if we are to assume they are staying put in NXT. Because with this shakeup this week, anything can happen. I am not aware of there being any sort of rule against them just, you know, drafting people from NXT. That's why I, you know, when I did my my picks there, I was pitching Drew McIntyre and Cien Almas and these people to come up. Who's to say that War Machine doesn't end up on the main roster? But I assume that they debuted on NXT this week because that's where they're going to be. And you look at the arrival of War Machine, you look at the arrival of Ricochet, you look at the arrival of EC3, Tommaso Ciampa now back from his injury. That's on top of a freshly heel Roderick Strong joining the Undisputed Era, a possibly babyface Pete Dunne, Johnny Gargano, right? He's got his job back. You've got Aleister Black as the new NXT champion. Andrade Cien Almas, although, again, I think he's moving on up. But NXT is looking pretty good for the remainder of 2018. They are positioned very strongly for the rest of the year. They're coming off maybe their best takeover show ever. The brand has a lot of buzz and a lot of momentum with the new faces they've brought in. So I'm very excited for the remainder of 2018 when it comes to NXT. I'm always worried about the main roster because of you-know-who. But with Triple H running NXT the way he is, I'm very comfortable and excited, I think, for how they have that brand position right now.